Chapter 9 The Gathering in the Woods. Alex and Connor slowly crawled out of the pond. They were soaked, muddy, and covered in lily pads. They shivered in the cold night air and had themselves tightly as they looked at the land around them. The ugly duckling pond was in the middle of a forest in the northern kingdom. The twins had passed it on their previous trip into the Land of Stories, but neither had experienced to become so acquainted with it on their next visit. "I cannot believe we just sang Grandma's house," Connor said through his chattering teeth. "It takes a lot of talent to submerge something that isn't even close to the water." Bits and pieces of their grandmother's cottage were still floating in the pond. Her rocking chair bobbed up and down in the water. Alex was so amazed she didn't even care how dirty or cold she was. "I sure hope Grandma has a really good house insurance, Alex." "Are you even listening to me?" Connor asked. She turned to face him. The excitement was practically glowing in her eyes. She didn't even care how they'd gotten there. They were finally there, and that's all that mattered. "We're here. We're actually here," Alex said. Even a trembling jaw couldn't take the smiling off her face. Despite the circumstances, it was the first time Alex had been happy in months. "Congratulations! You've managed to successfully and dangerously transport us to the fairy tale world." "Again," Connor said with a smile of his own. "I've got to say I prefer Grandma's methods of transportation than yours." Alex's smile disappeared as the reality of it set in. She surveyed the forest around the pond more closely. "Something's wrong," she said. "Of course there's something wrong," Connor said. "Grandma's cottage is at the bottom of a pond. How are you going to explain that one to her?" "That's not what I mean," Alex said. "Listen, do you hear that?" Connor raised his eyebrows and looked from the side to side. The pond and the forest around it were dead silent. "I don't hear anything," Connor said. "Exactly," Alex said. "We're standing at the edge of a pond, and there are no sounds at all. No frogs or crickets or anything." Connor nodded, understanding what she meant. It was so eerie he was surprised he hadn't noticed it before. "It's like everything is on mute," he said. "Or hiding," Alex said. Suddenly, on the other side of the pond, a dark figure emerged from the trees. It startled the twins at first until they saw it was small and barely the size of a dog. It was running very fast on 4 seating legs and had something white trailing behind it. Alex and Connor hid behind the closest tree and watched it from afar. The strange creature showed it to a fast and springy walk, and as delicately approached the pond. It was wearing a dark cloak and lowered its hood with its front 4 paws before taking a drink from the water. The moonlight reflecting off the water illuminated the mysterious visitor, and the twins couldn't make out what it was. It had dark red fur, pointy eyes, and a long, fluffy tail with a white tip. "It's a fox," Connor whispered to Alex. The fox jerked his head from up the water, and his bright yellow eyes stared at their direction. He must have had impeccable hearing. The twins stayed still. The fox headed for the trees in the opposite direction from where he had come. "Where is he going?" Alex whispered to her brother. "Do I look like an expert in cloaked mammals?" Connor said. The fox disappeared in the trees, but besides being the only living thing they'd seen, there was something very intriguing about him. Neither twins wanted to let him out of their sight. "We should follow him," Connor said. "Why?" Alex asked. Connor shrugged. "Do you have another plan we're supposed to be following?" he said. "Good point," Alex said, and without another moment to waste, the twins began chasing after the small fox, hoping he would lead them to someone or something that would help them find their mother. Alex and Connor ran after the fox for a good while. He wasn't sticking to a path. It was so hard to see him between the trees ahead. He was incredibly fast for the size, too, so it was difficult to keep up with him. They were happy to run and warm their bodies, though. Their clothes began to dry the more they went. "It looks like we're going into the dwarf forest," Alex whispered as they jogged. "How can you tell?" Connor asked. "The trees are getting thicker and it's getting harder to see the sky," Alex said. "So I'm feeling more anxious the farther we run. That's the biggest clue." Connor gulped. The dwarf forest had never been a good place for the twins. The last time they'd been in this part of the Land of Stories, they had been chased by wolves and kidnapped by goblins. The fox came into view ahead, and the twins came to a belated stop. like cars with bad brakes. They hid behind the biggest tree they could find, and each gestured for the other one to be quiet. The fox was standing on his hind legs next to a stone well in the middle of a clearing. The moon illuminated the clearing like a spotlight. The fox stood very still, keeping close watch on the trees around him. He was waiting, but for what, the twins couldn't tell. At one point, the fox looked directly at the twins' hiding spot, but didn't appear to see them. The twins wondering if they blended with the forest, with the rest of the forest because they were so dirty or just because it was so dark. It was unnervingly quiet in the dwarf forest, too. It was surprising since the twins had remembered hearing all kinds of troubling sounds coming from close by and afar the last time they were here. A few twigs snapped, echoed into the night as someone or something made its way into the clearing. The fox jerked his head in the direction of the snaps and smiled, exposing several tiny sharp teeth. A sly expression came to his face. The twins couldn't tell if it was because he was pleased or just because he was a fox. 3 cloaked figures stepped into the clearing. They were all different shapes and sizes. One was enormous, another was only a little bigger than the twins, and a third was as tiny as the fox. A large raven swooped into the clearing, perching on the well next to the fox. It didn't need a cloak. Its dark red feathers were enough to camouflage in the night. The others surrounded the well, all facing the fox. The fox rubbed his small paws together. "So glad you could all make it," the fox said through his toothy grin. The smallest of the cloaked figures lowered its hood. He had shiny black eyes, white stripes, a short snout. It was a badger, and a paranoid one at that. "It isn't safe for us to be out at night like this," the badger said, and nervously looked around. "At least not anymore." "Relax, Badger," the fox said. "If the Enchantress wanted to harm us, we would be dead by now." "Get to the point, Fox," the raven squawked impatiently. "Why did you call us here tonight?" The largest figure lowered its hood. It was a gigantic brown bear. "Make it fast. I've got cubs at home," the bear said, with a booming and growly voice. Alex Connor had never seen so many talking animals in the same place. They hoped their presence would remain unnoticed. "I've just returned from the Eastern Kingdom," the fox said. "I heard the Enchantress did a number on it, but I wanted to see it with my own 2 ears. The whole place is a disaster. It's covered in vines and thorn bushes as far as the eye can see. It's worse than I ever imagined. It's as if the thornbush pit has taken over the entire kingdom." "Oh dear," the badger squealed and began nervously tapping his paws together. "It's going across the other kingdom. Is it going to the other kingdoms? I hate thorns," the raven said. "That's the thing," the fox explained. "The plants grow perfectly along the border. They didn't cross to the northern kingdom at all. I even tried provoking a plant with a stick, but it only coiled around the edge and that touched the eastern kingdom ground. It takes very powerful magic to be that specific." The animals exchanged worried expressions. The remaining hooded member of the group maintained his silence. Alex Connor wondered what kind of creature is under the cloak. "Why would the plants always stay in one kingdom?" the bear asked. "I reckon the Enchantress has taken over the world in style," the fox said. She's doing it one kingdom at a time, showing the world that the Happily Ever Assembly is no match for her. It's only a matter of time before she takes over the dwarf forest too, and we must be prepared." "But what would she want with the dwarf forest?" the badger asked, shaking his head. "It's full of nothing but criminals and outcasts like us." The fox grin grew bigger. "Exactly why I called you all here tonight," he said. "I think we should pledge our alliance to the Enchantress now, before she strikes." The animals grunted and growled their protests. "You're out of your rabbit-praying mind, Fox," the bear said. "We're already fugitives," the raven said. "You want us to get locked away in Pinocchio prison next?" The fox raised his paws at them, calming their nerves. "Hear me out before you disregard me entirely," he said. "Think about it. The reason we live in these parts is because none of us could fit in a Happily Ever Assembly regulated society. The Enchantress is going to take charge. It's going to change all that. The world of fairies and man is over. If we show loyalty to her now, then when she takes over, and she will take over, she may spare us." The fox was slowly starting to convince the animals. They all remained quiet, except the badger. "We can't do that," the badger said. "It's already bad enough living on exile. Can you imagine what they'd do to us if we sided with her?" "That's where you're mistaken, badger," the fox said. "You're still in the happily ever after frame of mind I saw the Enchantress is capable of. Trust me, all the fairies in the world aren't going to be able to stop her this time. If they could, they would have done it so already." The animals looked back and forth to one another. All were afraid to be the first to express their interest. "How will we show our alliance?" the bear said. "You're not agreeing with him, are you?" Badger asked the bear. The bear growled restlessly. "We're already castaways. What more can they do to us?" he asked. "If the world is changing, why not change with it? Especially if there's something in it for us." The raven bobbed up and down, contemplating. "What's your plan, fox?" she asked. "I've been asking around. I've got some ideas," the fox said. His mouth had dropped the smile, but his eyes hadn't. "What about you?" the raven squawked in the direction of the unidentified creature. "You've been awfully quiet." "He's always quiet," the bear said. "I don't even know if he can speak." The hooded creature looked around at his fellow animals and nodded his head. A simple and singular ribbon came from under his hood. Alex and Connor gasped. Could it be? The badger must have heard the twins' reaction because he grew more timid than ever before. "We should get out of here before we get caught." "Think it over," the fox said. "You'll know where to find me." All the animals put their hoods back over their heads and disappeared into the night. The fox took one last look around the forest before following the others. Perhaps the badger's paranoia had gotten to him. The twins knew they wanted to follow the mysterious hooded creature. They made sure the other animals were in a safe distance away, then bolted through the forest after their new target. The forest became darker and darker as they went. The twins had been running for a few minutes, jumping over boulders and tree roots. They were cold, tired, and lost. It was almost nostalgic for them, reminding them of their last trip, but there was no sign of the hooded creature. "I don't get it," Alex said. "He was just here." "It looks like he disappeared into thin air," kind of screamed. Alex turned to see what had startled his big brother. Emerging from the trees directly behind them was the hooded creature. He was much taller and more menacing than he looked in the clearing. He began slowly walking toward the twins. They clutched each other in fear. "We're sorry for following," Connor said. "We thought we might have known you." "We didn't mean any harm," Alex said. "We'll leave you alone now." The creature kept coming toward us. "You better get away from us," Connor said, taking another approach. "My sister knows magic. She just sank a house. She'll mess you up." Alex stared at his brother in disbelief. Did he think this was helpful? The creature froze just a few feet away from them and looked the twins up and down and side to side. Connor picked up a big stick on the ground and began swinging in the hooded creature's attention. "I played t-ball in elementary school," he said. "I'm warning you." A soft chuckle came from under the creature's cloak. "Come now, is that really how you're going to greet an old friend?" said a very familiar and proper voice. Its owner slowly removed his hood, and the twins sighed with relief. "Froggy!" the twins exclaimed. They jumped into a huge hug, violently embracing their old friend. "Hello, Connor." "Hello, Alex," Froggy said, and hugged them back. "I wish I could say it's a surprise seeing you two, but you've always had a knack of being in danger." Froggy was a tall, man-sized frog with big bright eyes and a wide mouth. He always dressed to impress. The twins noticed he was wearing a three-piece suit under his cloak. "It's good to see you, Froggy," Connor said. "We missed you so much," Alex said. "Well, I've missed you," Froggy said, and he leaned down to look them both in the eye. "You've both grown so much. You're practically grown-ups." His expression fell once he remembered where this reunion was taking place. "What on earth are you two doing here at a time like this? Does your grandmother know where you are?" Alex and Connor exchanged guilty glances at each other. Not really," Connor said. "Grandma doesn't know exactly where we are," Alex said, not looking him in the eye. "I should certainly hope not," Froggy said. "The dwarf forests are still too dangerous for you to be in, especially these days, and especially this late." Alex and Connor gave each other another glance. "I recognize that look," Froggy said. "Why aren't you telling me?" "What are you telling me? And why are you both so filthy?" Alex and Connor considered lying to him for a second, but knew they couldn't. Our grandma doesn't know we're in this world, Alex confessed. Froggy's wide mouth fell open, and he stared blankly at the twins. How did you get here? Alex stayed at our grandmother's house. I wasn't kidding, Connor said. That's why we're covered in swamp juice. It was horrifying and strangely awesome at the same time. You sank a house, Froggy said, dumbfounded. You know, normally I would question such a possibility, but I don't with you two. It was an accident, Alex said. I activated another one of Grandma's portals. Your technique needs work, Connor said, out of the side of his mouth. Froggy looked around at the forest. They could tell, knowing they had snuck into a fairy tale world made him uneasy. Children, you shouldn't be here, Froggy said. These are very dangerous times, and evil Enchantress is at large. Is Mia, Alex said. We all know about her. She kidnapped our mom. What? Froggy said, I'm so sorry. Not as sorry as we are, Connor said, and our grandma practically imprisoned us trying to stop us from coming here. Clearly it worked, Froggy said with an eye roll. Has she met you two? Are you even capable of sitting still? Thank you, Connor said, glad of the validation. Wait, Alex said, noticing something for the first time. Froggy, you're a frog again. Oh yeah, Connor said. What gives? Despite his transformation back into Prince Charlie, the long-lost charming prince, Alex and Connor still imagined him as a frog. Whenever they thought of him, they had to remind themselves that it wasn't his natural form. I'm undercover, Froggy said. Your grandmother transformed me back into a frog so I could keep watch over the animals and criminals living in the dwarf forest during the crisis. We figured they'd trust me more as an amphibian. Some of them even remember me from when I was living here. Are you really going to join the Enchantress? Alex said. I doubt it, Froggy said. These are just a bunch of crooks trying to make the current situation work for them. I wouldn't worry too much about it. But still, the Happy Ever After Assembly wants to keep an eye on them just in case things change. Froggy folded his arms and looked between the twins. I'm sure they'd be much more interested in knowing what you two are up to. Froggy, you can't tell anyone we're here, Connor said. They'll send us back. We can't be stuck at home, not when we know our mother is in danger, Alex said. They both looked up at him with large, pleading eyes. Children, you know I care deeply about you, but... Froggy started, but wasn't. We're not children, Connor shouted. Everyone keeps calling us that, and I'm sick of it. We shouldn't have proved ourselves after everything we've been through already. It's not like we're a couple of irresponsible kids sneaking to a party. We're two young adults trying to save our mother's life. You can tell our grandmother if you have to, Alex said. She can lock us up at home all she wants, but we just keep finding ways to get back here until our mom is safe. We have to find her, Froggy, Connor said. We already lost our dad. We can't lose our mom. We're not going to stop until we save her. Froggy hopelessly looked back and forth between them with his big, glossy eyes. He had to put him between a rock and a hard place. First things first, Froggy said. We need to get you out of the dwarf forest before anything else sees you. Let's get somewhere safe and we'll discuss it further. Alex and Connor nodded, but they already knew there wouldn't be anything to discuss. His loyalty to them was much stronger than it was to their grandmother. He was their friend before he was her subject. Froggy placed his cloak over the twins and led them safely through the forest. Alex and Connor were so relieved that they had miraculously made contact with an ally so soon, but they knew the worst was yet to come in the uncertain days ahead. Alright, that's the end of Chapter 9. I hope you enjoyed the reading. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more from the Land of Stories, The Enchantress Returns, or more books later on. And if you want to read certain books during the time, don't forget to place any comments in the video below. And I hope you enjoyed the reading.